So the Johnson is doing the same irresponsible, negligent, stupid thing that he did a year ago and talked about let the bodies pile high. This is another contradiction of the idiots at the Times. The idiots at the Times are putting that without any qualification, without any quotation marks, without any condition. Why is it stupid? Because right now, as India is surging, the virus is surging across India, and there is clear need for visitors from India, people coming from India, to be treated, to quarantine and isolation, etc. And there is no sign that either the virus in India or the people coming from India would go down in the foreseeable future. So what on earth is the Times doing this for? And who is responsible for this idiocy? We should be talking more about that and the impact of the rising surge in India. So this is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel being broadcast online, that is only on the internet, from London in the UK within quotation marks. And we shall be doing this based on the evidence that contextually is available. So there is a short kind of banner underneath at the bottom of the Times today, which includes this one. Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, has said Boris Johnson should resign. So that's it. I mean, that is a complete spin, absolute spin. Then it is completely diffused. Any impact that particular set of words has is diffused by the fact that it is then followed in the same sentence if he is found to have broken the ministerial code over his flat renovation. This is the contradiction of the corrupt Fleet Street and the British press. Typical contradiction. And there is a page 2 item about Scotland again, but that is connecting Iran peddling disinformation to influence Scottish election. And underneath is a good sign for mother jailed by Tehran, that is Nazanin Ghaffari Ratcliffe. And there is a lying piece on page 4, which says planning reforms lead national recovery drive in Queen's speech. That is Johnson's script. It's not Queen's script. Now, where is the safety of people walking? This police community support officer was murdered. where dog walkers have been beaten up in South London. And there is an Indian named person called Majumdar, Krishnendu Majumdar, who is been featuring in the news about Noel Clark, the sex abuser. And there is pressure from cons on Johnson to have longer list of safe countries. That is stupid. That is again stupid. And it is contradicted by the stupid confession by the Times about India on page 10, which says that India's true death toll is revealed in its crematoriums. Now that is true. That is true. So if the Times knows that is true, then why is the stupid Times promoting this ministers calling on Johnson to remove the restrictions on countries that are now under restrictions? And this one on the front page, this stupidity, absolutely irresponsible, and it's going to create problems in the UK. And there is this other contradictory thing in the Times which is absolutely accurate, that it's contradicting the Times' line. It is saying that volunteers passing on virus at Olympic torch relay around Japan's cities. And the war between India and the diplomatic propaganda war between India and China is being mentioned, but it's not in the headline. China mocking funeral pyres in India. And it's an item from Beijing by Didi Tang. The Chinese Communist Party has provoked a public backlash for contrasting a successful rocket launch with a funeral pyre for coronavirus victims in India on social media. The Central Political and Legal Affairs Commission wrote, China's lighting fire versus India's lighting fire. It was accompanied by two photographs, one of the rocket launch and the other of a cremation. The post on Weibo added that the new cases of COVID-19 in India exceeded 400,000 a day last week. And here, too late, but this is something that was suspected, this kind of thing. Nadia Comaneci, the first to score a perfect 10, is said to have been abused by her coach. Decades later, she was starved and beaten. In 1968, the Romanian gymnastics coach, Bela Caroli, saw a 6-year-old girl executing immediately graceful cartwheels during her break at a small rural school. Afterwards, he went from classroom to classroom until he found her and signed her up for his training facility. 8 years later, the girl, Nadia Comaneci, became the first gymnast to score full marks at the Olympic Games, an achievement thought unattainable. Yet the relentless pursuit of perfection that drove Kamachi to the top allegedly had a dark side. A historian has claimed that she had other pupils in Caroli's charge. She and other pupils in Caroli's charge were frequently starved, beaten, and psychologically abused. The historian discovered a large cache of reports on Caroli's coaching operations in the archives of the Securitat, the Romanian communist regime's Stasi-like secret police. Now that is abuse, but here is an abuse of the police. Well, abuse of police powers. And the Times has got no shame in running this in this way. It should be on the front page. And it says the headline, the heading, no suspect identified in 1 million burglaries as victims are let down. Think about that. 1 million burglaries treated by the police as no crime at all. And that's Nadia in action. So the abuse of children and abuse of gymnasts and girls is going on, has been going on at all the events and during the last 68, so 78, 88, 98, 2008, 18, so 50 plus years. And this is not reported, it's not actually hinted at in the piece about Nadia Comaneci. Now this is a cartoon that has got a good bubble there. Bloody government. They said we wouldn't be back to normal until June, and it is actually reflecting on the headline. Tory sleaze. So that this cartoonist is of course referring to corruption that was absent during the pandemic restrictions. Now, what is the Times letter? This one is a very short one. And it says social distancing. And the writer is Margaret Countess Attlee. Is she the widow of Clement Attlee or related to Clement Attlee? We shall see. Social distancing. Your headline, hug friends in a fortnight. News, May 1, is alarming. I trust this is merely government guidance and not mandatory. And all the letters are written by people with European names. And the fascist Le Pen, Marine Le Pen, is making a very corrupt and dishonest promise. She's saying she'll restore French peace and unity. She's the one that has been part of the inciters of disunity and hatred. And she is now promising that she would do that, the opposite. And this is Murdoch's scum. What is it talking about? And this is not news. This is about the line of duty. Now, what the scum is missing there and hiding is that the fact that people want the line of duty shows the emptiness of the real life policing. Because line of duty has been appealing to viewers because it is tackling issues that the actual police have been refusing to tackle, thus, in effect, abolishing the police or the duties and the role of the police. And the scum is overly celebrating ahead of the poll in Hartlepool that Labour red wall even comelier, and he's going to the Labour seats, the parliamentary seats that Jeremy Corbyn gave to Boris Johnson in December 2019 are going to get even worse. That is what this scum is saying. And it's a comment on the fact we have been calling it Starmer has been politically murdering the Labour Party. That is what it is about. But they are not saying politically murdered. That is our world exclusive diagnostic phrase. And they are denying that Johnson said that let the bodies pile up. And there is an admission in the scum which is absolutely historic. It's saying that Williams' helicopter caused cancer. That's what they're saying. And they're promoting the lunatic celebration about achieving COVID, end of COVID in Britain. That is a lie. That is a lie consistent with the lies of Boris Johnson. And the criminal liar, Trevor Kavanagh, in the scum, is defending Johnson's breach of the rules and dishonesty about the flat decorations. And they've got 2 pages. Now this is pornographic. This is complete pornographic, the display. That's how Murdoch made the billions by this scum, pornographic scum, and he became a billionaire. People who don't know the history, that is what made him the money. and it's a corrupt, anti-democratic, degenerating platform. Anti-democratic, pro-racist, and corrupt and criminal. And they're saying that the alleged proposal by the Iranians about releasing Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe is false. They're saying state television in Iran said the UK would pay an historic 400 million debt. So the Iranians have been what is called, I mean, it is not the correct word, but calling blackmail anything else doesn't get across the kind of fact. That's why I'm using this. So the Iranians are actually blackmailing. This is a blackmail. They should not be using this woman in that way at all. They should find something more dignified and intelligent and diplomatic. And there is this bigger, well, that piece should be as big as the one that devoting to Noel Clarke, who said, "Lick face of actress." Now, this is going to continue. And our position is that any person from African or Asian background, whether they're born in Britain, British citizens or not, anyone in any position, any walk of life, let's say, because of the extra burden placed on people from African and Asian backgrounds by the persistence of racism, anyone in any position has the duty to behave with extraordinary and extra care and sense of responsibility. That is not to say that they should be treated, if they commit a wrong, if an Asian or African person commits a wrong in Britain, that they should be excused, the due accountability. No way. They should be held to account equally. But the reality is that they are not held to account equally because there is this extra impact that affects the rest of society, or rest of the community, or rest of the demography that this particular person belongs to or appears to belong to. So, for example, this Noel Clarke, his demographic affiliation would be with the people of African origin. And the innocent people in that demography, that group, would be implicated for his wrong behavior. That is the thing that needs to be included in the broader overdue program of education that is missing. And the education is missing in the context of the Asian community as well. And we should talk about the education and the definition of education later. There is a piece about a lunatic who is being flatteringly described as music icon. Nile Rodgers has 11 television in his home. and he keeps them all on 24 hours a day. The 68-year-old claims the white noise helps him concentrate when he is working. He said the cable company says, I have the most televisions in one house of anyone they have ever known. The US songwriter who lives in Connecticut added, the bedroom television is on and set to the same decibel level as Concord. I always fall asleep with the television on, only to wake the next morning when I just laugh and think to myself, Jesus, how the hell did I sleep through that? He also told Sunday Times magazine he thinks in music, not words. No, he doesn't think in music either. He thinks in idiocy. He's an idiot. And it is an amazing fact that they haven't mentioned any accident. When while he's asleep with all these devices connected electronic to electric power, how is it that no accident or fire has happened so far? When there is a piece on the Financial Times on page 1 that says that Russian oligarchs have taken legal action against HarperCollins about the book on Putin. And there is a big piece on the Financial Times, page 21. Rumpus rooms. Row over refurbishment puts Johnson on the back foot. Now that is in contrast with the criminal liar Trevor Kavanagh in The Scum, backing Johnson. Now the Financial Times has got on the same page two contradictory kind of headings. One is by Rana Faruhar. It's a woman who seems to have this name, probably an Arabic origin named Rana. And the other one is by Roger Altman, who is described as the founder and executive chair of Evercore and was Deputy U.S. Treasury Secretary under President Bill Clinton. So the first one is about Biden's battles have only just begun, and the other one by Roger Altman, U.S. Republicans no longer understand business. But both of them are wrong. And there is a piece about Europe by Tony Barba, and the headline is, or heading is, Napoleon's legend is alive and is as divisive as ever. Fidel Castro once said, more people know about Napoleon Bonaparte because of the brandy named after him than because of Austerlitz, the French emperor's most famous battlefield victory. On the 200th anniversary of his death, Napoleon's legacy lives on in ways more lasting than Castro gave him credit for. 2 weeks ago, 20 retired French generals called on the armed forces to save the nation from what they termed the dangers of radical Islam and civil war. Now, this is the one that is referring to the Times piece about Marine Le Pen, the fascist, racist, anti-Muslim, promising peace and harmony in France if she is elected in return for getting votes. That's what this is about from Marine Le Pen. 2 weeks ago, 20 retired French generals called on the armed forces in France to save the nation from what they termed the dangers of radical Islam and civil war. Their appeal received enthusiastic backing from Marine Le Pen, the far-right politician. Now, this is the truth. She is in favor of fascist military regime. So she cannot be sincerely committed to non-military civilian democracy and accountability and peace and harmony and an end to racism, an end to anti-Islamic kind of fanatic resentment and incitement. Anyone watching this may have noticed that we refer to anti-Islamic activities going on in the West, and that is because of the evidence that they are obsessed with Islam. They don't make any distinction between Muslims, ordinary Islam, and what they call radical Islam. Because within the Muslim population that I know of, there is no discussion. There is absolutely no discussion about what is called radical Islam. In fact, the Muslims are indifferent to Islam. That is the reality. And that is something that should have been going on this month. This is the month of Ramadan. It's the middle of Ramadan now, second part. And there is no discussion about Islam even, ordinary Islam. But the impact of anti-Islamic rhetoric and anti-Islamic utterances by the likes of Marine Le Pen, of course, and echoed by Emmanuel Macron, they incite hatred against ordinary Muslims. And the perpetuation of anti-Muslim misunderstanding and misconception, intolerance continues unabated. Now here is the big read on the Financial Times on page 21, which is headed UK Politics. The big read, UK Politics, on page 21 of the Financial Times, today, Monday, the 3rd of May, 2021. And it reads the introduction. The Conservatives are well ahead of Labour in polls, opinion polls, they are saying. But a feud with his former aide raises questions about the United Kingdom Prime Minister's character and a lack of heavyweight advisors willing to stand up to him. And it's written by George Parker. It's a whole page. And its main heading, written in white or yellow on black background, provided by Boris Johnson's image. Curtains and courtiers, how much trouble is Johnson facing? Now this is the Financial Times that is edited, so-called in the formal editorial post, is a Lebanese-born, Muslim background Arab woman. But there is no evidence that she has any influence on the contents of the Financial Times, and she has not even begun the overdue process of reversing anti-Muslim hatred, intolerance, misconception, misunderstanding, and lying. As I have said earlier, that the likes of Macron and Marine Le Pen keep the anti-Muslim hatred going in a way that is bound to create constant, non-stop incitement, misunderstanding, and hatred against ordinary Muslims. So they are saying that the conservatives are well ahead of Labour in opinion polls. Now that is not true. Well ahead is not true. They're ahead, but not well ahead. Now this is a whole page. So we're not going to read the whole page. What we're going to do is to read bits of it that represent accurately the main view that is contained in the piece. And the first highlighted piece is that Johnson has never learned the advisability of obeying certain rules. He gets impatient when he's told you can't do this or that. Now, why is that the case? No student, objectively defined, no student of the last 500 years, let's say, or let's say 400 years. Well, let's start from Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell, whatever the length of time. No student of so-called British politics would have kind of overlooked the need to maintain consistency when it comes to various claims about due process and about the free speech and all the accountability and all the rest of it. But as we have said, world exclusively, originally in this program and also by our movement, dating back much longer than the existence of this particular platform and the channel, we have said that Boris Johnson is one of the people, in fact, the one currently, because he is in the, quote, top post incumbent at number 10 Downing Street. He has been given impunity. The Johnson has been given impunity from accountability. And he is a congenital liar, even by the most conservative of observers, like the most recent ambassador from France that spent several years in the UK, and in the process of which posting she had access to observing Boris Johnson from angles and quarters and at events that others would not have had if they didn't hold a diplomatic posting similar to the one that the ex-ambassador had. So the Financial Times is saying, curtains and coaches, how much trouble is Johnson facing? And the first thing that they said is that he doesn't care about rules. Now, it's not that he doesn't care about rules. It's that he behaves as if he owns. He owns the country. This is an extrapolation of what he said to Jennifer Arcuri when she said that he should not kiss her in public in the street. And his reply was, I am the mayor. I don't care. That's what he said. Now that would be, depending on the particular culture, the particular views and outlook of the person or persons witnessing Johnson kissing a woman in public. It would be an obscenity. It would be objectionable. It would be offensive. And it would be discourteous to the people. Because it is most likely that Johnson would have been kind of identified, spotted, and his profile was such, due to the corrupt media promoting him constantly, that people would think that he was behaving in an inappropriate manner. But his reply was that he was the mayor and that He doesn't care. It was his city. He said, it's my city. So he expressed a proprietorial relationship with London, which is between 8 and 9 million people. How could he say that it was his city? Nobody else could say that in context. And the fact that he said that to Jennifer Arcuri can be factually extrapolated and applied today to the question, as an answer to the question, how much trouble is he in? Johnson has behaved throughout the last 30 years, let's say, as if he has got impunity. Clearly, he is not clinically insane. Otherwise, he would not have been able to do the crafty, corrupt things that he has done over the last 30 years. And he would not have been able to manipulate his way into number 10 Downing Street. So he's not clinically insane, and he hasn't been declared clinically insane, but he's criminally liable and culpable. Now, any student of law or the legal system, or criminal law, common law, let's say, any licensed law trader worth their kind of claim to know the law would have spotted that. And without incurring the wrath of the likes of the crook Trevor Kavanagh, Keir Starmer, who is a licensed law trader, should have had no problem in putting Boris Johnson in the dock, which he hasn't been able to do, despite the fact that there are reluctant, grudging acceptance by Fleet Street that remains committed to backing the liar, Boris Johnson. There has been nothing like the outrage that should have been dominant about Boris Johnson being dishonest and being a liar and behaving in a way that makes him totally unfit for that office, regardless of the particular allegation, regardless of the level of evidence. And there is evidence. For example, despite the fact that the Murdoch scum is lying, the ITV reporter, Robert Peston, has posted that he had heard, he had contacted, and he had communications with more than one person who heard the audio recording of Boris Johnson saying that let the bodies pile up. So Boris Johnson is not clinically insane, but criminally insane. It's not the McNaughton rule that he's lost his responsibility as what is called diminished responsibility. And for the time being, when he is committing the crime, he is affected by the loss of responsibility, what is called the McNaughton rule in criminal law, in English criminal law. He has not diminished, he has not suffered that, because he cannot be suffering that so many times and remain on course for various posts that he has been holding. So, in the criminal law, the manslaughter is replaces murder when the person, the accused, is claimed to have lost his sense of responsibility and became incapable of realizing his responsibility. So it's called going through diminished responsibility at the moment during the process of doing the crime. Now that happens only once, or very rarely. But Johnson has been doing this for over 30 years. Too many crimes he has been committing. For example, the criminal incitement. It's a long, convoluted story, but he incited somebody to beat up a journalist who had been looking at the behavior of a criminal friend of his who was in jail. Now that friend of his was the son of an Iranian woman, Shusha Gapi, who married a white man. And Shusha Gapi became quite anglicized, whether directly as a result of her marrying a white person or not is not revealed so far anyway. And her son, Darius Gapi, was in jail for some kind of fraud or crime. And Johnson and Gapi were friends at school. So Johnson wanted his friend to get some kind of relief in getting the knowledge, in finding the knowledge that one of his kind of, he thought, enemies, but this journalist was only doing his journalistic job of investigating Darius Gapi and his co-crook or crooks. So Johnson rang up this individual who he thought was capable of doing beating up. And he said he should do the beating up or organize the beating up of that journalist who was investigating Darius Gapi. And Johnson was crafty enough to say that he didn't want to be identified as being linked to this conversation or this event if it went ahead and this journalist got beaten up. He was that crafty. That is intensive criminality of intent. That is mens rea. And he got the mens rea and the actus rea together. The intent and the action. He was crafty enough to elaborate on that and tell the person he was speaking to make sure that he, Johnson, didn't get identified. I mean, that is something that should have been prosecuted. He should have been prosecuted for that incitement. And he wasn't. And that is one of the examples of why I have called Johnson's criminal career as one of impunity. That somehow, somewhere in the UK state apparatus, somebody is constantly giving him the impunity from liability, from prosecution, from criminal prosecution, a charge and arrest, whatsoever, for which other people would be prosecuted and charged and most likely convicted. So that is a sample of what Boris Johnson does and has been doing. So this denial, this whole daily denial by the Fleet Street liars that he did say those things about the let the bodies pile up is completely incredible, inconsistent, doesn't add up, because he is on the record of other things. He is most likely to have said what has been and is being reported. I mean, his incitement to an innocent person doing their job of investigating a criminal or a series of criminality leaves no need for any further evidence that he committed a crime there. Incitement, soliciting, crime, and conspiracy. And he was arranging to be exonerated or being left out of any mention about that incident. Imagine that person did get beaten up, and imagine that he got beaten up more seriously and dangerously, grievously, and that something grievous happened to them. And Boris Johnson made sure the insurance was that he was getting this particular acquaintance to make sure that he, Boris Johnson, didn't get mentioned in any of this. So he was most likely foreseeing the extent of damage and injury that the target could be caused. Now that is serious criminality. And Johnson has not been prosecuted for that. Imagine how many other similar things he has done and things that have not been brought out into the public. This one has only become available because somebody did the recording or did make the recording available, and the transcript is publicly available and accessible. But that actually says a lot more than just a rumor. Why would people, it's not Dominic Cummings, why would people that Robert Peston has contacts with, why would they say that they heard Boris Johnson saying the things that have been alleged? Why would they say that if he didn't say that? Because it is not part of the ordinary conversation, is it? That a government post holder, he is the prime minister, and he was saying that he didn't want the lockdowns, which had the inevitable correlation with the large numbers of people dying. So Johnson actually behaved a year ago exactly with the same attitude that Narendra Modi has been behaving. And it was Modi who did the same thing as Johnson wanted to do, that is to say, not have the lockdown. And the result of Modi's not having the lockdown has caused millions of Indians to get infected. And hundreds of thousands of Indians to die. And the fact that the Times is saying that the numbers of people in India who are reported as having been affected by the virus or having died may not be the real picture is absolutely true. That is true. That admission is true. But it's not true that the Times has admitted spontaneously. The Times has seen that the overwhelming evidence of the virus and the impact and the connection between the policy of the central Indian government fronted by Modi and the other BJP controlled agencies and outlets. The evidence is so overwhelming that the numbers are an underestimate throughout India and have been. And this is what happens. When there is a scientific kind of connection between the lack of any lockdown and lack of precaution, lack of restrictions to prevent and stop the spread of virus, then virus spreads. And it has the consequences. No government claiming to be patriotic to its people, or let's say no government fronted by the likes of Johnson or Narendra Modi, both of whom claim to be extra caring and careful, would be doing anything that causes people to experience illness that is avoidable, sickness that is avoidable, and suffer fatal kind of consequences that should not have been allowed to happen in the first place. So the Fleet Street liars, every day they are saying that Boris Johnson is achieving something. So the daily Beaverbrook, the Canadian races legacy, the Daily Express, appears to be edited by such criminally kind of contemptuous perpetrators as editors or editorial decision makers that every day they look for a front page splash that is out of the ordinary, that is uncommon in the ordinary experience. So they give credit to Johnson for achievements that are not real. But even if they are not real, the victims, that the readers, are not that careful. The first impression after reading the latest sensational claim, untruthful claim in favor of Johnson, catches the eye and does the damage immediately before they have got any time or opportunity to reflect on the reliability and veracity of the latest sensational claim. Same thing is happening in India. During the height of her kind of tenure in the 70s, Jawaharlal Nehru's daughter, Indira Nehru, who was misnamed Indira Gandhi, and I shall recap on why I call it misnaming her as Gandhi. When she was at the height of her popularity, immediately caused by the Indian intervention in 1971, and Indian claimed subsequently that they liberated Bangladesh from Pakistan or Pakistan army. She did have a period of widespread popularity. And there was a mentally criminal slave, R.K. Karanjia. Now, R.K. Karanjia published a weekly newspaper. And it was like Karanjia, he came from a Persian fire-worshipping religious background. I mean, there is a section in the population in Maharashtra and some other places where there is a significant number of the demography consists of people who worship fire. They're called Parsis, and they're from Persian origin. Now, R.K. Karanjia was publishing the weekly. It was treating Indira Gandhi as a goddess. And R.K. Karanjia was being completely dishonest. He was ingratiating himself to Indira Nehru, just ingratiating himself. And he was overstating her charisma, her intellect, her concern for the country, none of which was justified or justifiable by the evidence of her behavior. So R.K. Karanjia was doing his crimes in the 70s. And the fact that he was lying for Indira Nehru became very clear in her treatment later in the 70s, when India, under her kind of incumbence in the post of prime minister, was completely sinking in corruption, public life. And critics with accurate kind of access to the goings on in her household blamed her son, not Rajiv Gandhi, but Sanjay. And he was implicated daily almost as ruling Indira Nehru, that she was a stooge in his hand. Sanjay was given the name in the English language, Sanjay. So he was renamed by the observers, critical observers, as Sanjay. And he did destroy her kind of remaining credibility. Of course, he died in a, quote, accident. So therefore the tales about him ended with his death in a air accident. Then she was, of course, murdered by two of our bodyguards, Sikh bodyguards. And that murder was followed by massacres of the Sikhs. Remember what we said earlier, that any African person or Asian person or person of Asian origin or African origin, or to add the least, Muslim origin in the West, has got the additional responsibility to think of the implication of their behavior, their character, their bad character on the innocent members of their demography. So what happened in the immediate aftermath of Indira Nehru being murdered by two of our bodyguards was that thousands of Sikhs, innocent Sikhs in Delhi and other places, were massacred in revenge. And of course, the invasion by the Indian army of the Sikhs' holy place, Golden Temple, was evidence of Indira Gandhi's having lost all connection with reality and her sense of responsibility. Now, one note about the fact that she was wrongly called Indira Gandhi because she was not a relation to Mahatma Gandhi or M.K. Gandhi, Mohanlal Karamchand Gandhi. She was married very briefly to the father of the sons, Sanjay and Rajiv, who was a fire-worshipping descendant of Persians living in what is now India and what was the subcontinent, Feroz Gandhi. She didn't stay with him long for two reasons. One was she had issues with him and he had issues with her, whatever the reasons. And she was devoted to Jawaharlal Nehru. So, like Donald Trump, Indira Nehru treated his daughter in practical terms, as one of the biographers of Trump has said, as his wife. That is what people thought of Indira Nehru, de facto as the wife of her father, who was the politician. And Indira Nehru was revered by the likes of Ian Mikado, who was a Labour left-wing kind of MP or politician in those days in the 40s, and later became an MP for Tar Hamlets, one part of Tar Hamlets, Ian Mikado. I mean, in conversations with me, Ian Mikado referred to Indira Gandhi as Madame. I mean, that is the extent of reverence that the corrupt British left politicos had for Indira Nehru. And I'm speaking from personal experience of having heard and had conversations with Ian Mikado about India and Indira Gandhi and the Indira Nehru, and all these stuff that floated around about Nehru's own affair with Mountbatten's wife, Edwina Mountbatten. And the tales are still very much active in India. Now, the clear sheet doesn't talk about any of that. The reason why they stole the name Gandhi was to give the flavor of Mahatma or M.K. Gandhi's campaign, whatever they were, and impose them, foist them, and attach them more like to the name of Indira Nehru. And she then became very much personally an embodiment of all the achievements of M.K. Gandhi, which is absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. And that was a crime, a criminal misappropriation of the name Gandhi in the context of Indira Nehru. And yet, everyone knew that. Everyone in India knew that. Everyone in the Indian kind of government, public life, the media, knew that that was what had been done. And yet they didn't question that. So they were complicit, as is the Indian media today. Just like R.K. Karanjia super inflated the image of Indira Nehru. Today's papers in India that are accessible to us from London, they are going out of their way to refuse, to avoid having to mention this criminal Narendra Modi as being in any way responsible, to the ridiculous extent that they are treating the raging surge of the virus in a way that suggests that Modi is not even in power. That is how they are treating the various correlatable, various chains of events. And the fact is that the Supreme Court, which we have named the Indian Supine Court, supine means without any backbone, spineless. The Supreme Court, the Supine Court in India, during the BJP misrule, has been reduced to a ludicrous, absolutely corrupt agency. Now, this is our view. Now, this guy who wrote the Financial Times, Weekend Financial Times, piece about the unmaking of India, he is a kind of professional career writer and commentator. So he wouldn't say that, but we have been saying that. Now, what has been happening with the removal of the lockdown? Modi did the removing of the lockdown just like Boris Johnson did. Well, Boris Johnson did it in delaying the imposition of the lockdown. But in India, Narendra Modi has refused to keep the lockdown in place. Johnson delayed imposing the lockdown in the UK, thus causing hundreds of thousands of deaths. Because in Britain as well, the numbers are underestimated and under-audited because of the complicity and capitulation to the lying regime by the various agencies that are supposed to be responsible for counting the casualties. And in India, this collusion and complicity and capitulation is worse for various historic institutional reasons. Because, for example, the main English language, quote, national India-wide newspapers like the Times of India, the Indian Express, and this name, this is a very significant name. This is called the Hindu. Now, these are all openly lying, understating the numbers of infections and the numbers of failures by the various parts of the Indian government to deal with the emergency that is raging. Raging when it's going out over, it's many times worse than what was witnessed in Brazil last year, and is still being witnessed in Brazil because of the fascists' kind of refusal to safeguard the people. Notice the word safeguard. We'll come back to that when talking about Hamlet's Council and its duties to safeguard these children, the 4 Bethnal Green schoolgirls. The weekly that R.K. Karangia produced was called the Blitz. Now, Blitz is a very wrong word for any publication to be given the name anywhere in the world, because Blitz is a German word, and Blitz was used by the Nazis proudly as they were attacking targets, including in London. Blitzkrieg, that's a German phrase. So R.K. Karangia was so stupid that he proudly gave the Nazi name to his weekly that then became dedicated to praising Indira Nehru. And why it was wrong? Because Indira Nehru was doing wrong things to Indians, to the people of India, Hindus. Of course, the Muslims were bearing the brunt of it right from the beginning in the 1940s, 47, when the British so-called withdrew. So the Karangia never admitted even the existence of the hundreds of millions of Muslims in India who were being denied basic human rights. Well, in the 70s, the human rights as a concept of international commentary and observation was less frequent in use. So Karangia gave the name to his propaganda for Indira Nehru that the Nazis had used. And he blitzed Indira Nehru's opponents. He attacked with the ferocity of the Nazis' physical attacks, the targets of his condemnation, and that was every single issue of the Blitz, while Karangia was centrally involved in commissioning and editing it, concerned targeting the people who were critical of Indira Gandhi's corruption, lies, incompetence, and so on. So this is not what is happening with the Times of India and the Hindu and the Indian Express and other English language ones that we can easily access. We cannot access the Indian native language publications because of the distinction between language and accurate translations, but the English ones are accessible and they are representative in terms of the editorial role being played by them, the political role being played by the Hindu, the Indian Express and the Times of India, and they are doing the same thing as Karangia did, except their disguise is suited to the times now. That is the period, the contemporary thing. They are appearing to be moderate and not partial, partisan. And as I said about the Indian supine court, the Supreme Court without any backbone, it is so corrupt, the Indian Supreme Court, that we shall have to, of course, because of the extent of the evidence needed, it is so corrupt that to say that the Supreme Court is corrupt is no longer kind of effective. Something else has to be found. Some kind of other adjective and expression has to be found. Of course, Supreme Courts, by the very name Supreme, carries for the brainwashable people in the population, every country, the idea that this is a heavy, kind of thoughtful, considerate bench or platform where the citizens and the majority of the people who live within a territory can expect reasonable behavior. That's not the case. As the main role model for this name, the Supreme Court, is the American Supreme Court. In its history has shown, it is not the court that is impartial, that is just, and it is a racist court even now, and it has been racist right throughout its existence, despite the promoted image of this woman called Ginsburg, who has died recently and has been canonized by her promoters. The Supreme Court is a racist court, and the Supreme Court's appointments in the USA are undemocratic, unfair, corrupt, and beyond accountability. So that is an outdated Supreme Court. It's not anything like the image that has been peddled and is still peddled by some on its behalf. So even the original one, that is the model, is that bad, and anything modeled after it has to be less comparable to it than it should be. For example, in the Indian Supreme Court, they have got almost every single fault and flaw and defect and policy lies, unconstitutionality, anti-Muslim institutionalization is so firm in the supine court that everything that the BJP, the Shiv Sena, the RSS and other fascist and racist anti-Muslim political movements want happen in India is being given legitimacy and the stamp of a court ruling by the supine court. All the violations that are ongoing in Kashmir are being completely suppressed. There is no recognition in the papers in India of what is going on in Kashmir. Kashmir is a Muslim majority country, and the Muslims are treated as being the lowest level of society in Kashmir occupied by India. And hundreds of millions of Muslims in other parts of India are being treated in the same way. Whenever it comes to low income, poverty, slum dwelling, the disproportionate number of people in those categories are Muslims. And Fleet Street doesn't talk about that. The BBC doesn't talk about that. And even in the Financial Times, this piece on the weekend, Financial Times, about the unmaking of India, stayed away from any reference to any of these things that I'm talking about. And this guy Rao, who lives in Bangalore in South India, is one of those professional peddlers, as commentators, that the Western media from time to time give space to, but they do that on the condition that they don't tell the truth about what is going on. This Guha was only given the space in the weekend Financial Times, that is Saturday, because of the raging infections and deaths from the virus. And that is the only reason why they even mentioned Narendra Modi. And Modi lost the election in West Bengal only because of the raging spread of the infection. And that raging spread was caused by Modi. He lifted the lockdown and he opened up the mixing of large numbers of people in public places without any restrictions, without any safety restrictions. And he did that in order to spread the political aims of the fascist coalition, the BJP, the Shiv Sena, the RSS, and similar-minded smaller and less publicly or less widely known outfits right across India. And the Home Secretary, Amit Shah, is such a hateful inciter that he has repeatedly threatened Bangladesh with sinking in the Bay of Bengal. He said that he would throw Bangladeshis and Bengalis into the Bay of Bengal. It's in breach of international law, in breach of Bangladesh's kind of sovereignty and Bangladesh's rights. That is how extremely openly hostile to the Muslims they are. They are threatening a Muslim majority country because of its Muslim majority. And when the Rohingyas were massacred and genocided by the Burmese, Narendra Modi flew to Rangoon to congratulate the head of the genociding regime, Aung San Suu Kyi. So what Modi is doing and what Amit Shah is doing, they are actually killing Hindus, because by demographic proportion, the majority of the affected people have to be Hindus. But they are murdering Hindus by following the same policy of contempt to the rights of the people that they applied against Muslims and the Dalits before. Which is why every policy and every action against Muslims must be seen as being preparatory to similar violations against Hindus as well by this Hindu fundamentalist fascist BJP coalition. So we move on to the Daily Mail serving the cause of the crook David Cameron. While he was still incumbent as Prime Minister, the Mail and the scum used periodic kind of forays into propaganda by Samantha Cameron. And they paraded Samantha Cameron proudly as David Cameron's secret weapon. So they have done this again now. And the pretext is that she's reached the age of 50 and she's talking about dieting. But this is not what the main motivation is. It's to divert attention from Cameron's corruption and criminality. So that's the secret weapon they've launched. That's Samantha Cameron, dieting at 50. So it's not just to salvage David Cameron, but also to support Boris Johnson. She's saying, Samantha Cameron, on page 7 of the Daily Mail, "Why I'm right behind Kerry" by Sam Cam. And they are condemning the Conservatives in Scotland, whose leader has asked Johnson to resign within that condition, which contradicts his demand as well, if he is found to have broken the rules. And the Daily Mail is also saying on page 10, just like this come about Thursday's election, the elections in local councils, or 2 local councils, including the regional London Assembly, these take place every 2 years, let's say. So, and every 2 years, half of the councils have their elections. Now, this is something that is happening a year later. What is happening this Thursday, the 6th of May, should have happened a year ago, but was cancelled or delayed because of the pandemic. Now, this is including from East London. This program is coming to you from East London in the UK. The 2 London boroughs that are having a referendum on whether to have the elected mayor scrapped. One is Tower Hamlets and one is Newham. Now, this is something we shall be discussing here. This is the one that is being distributed by Newham. And it says, on top, the leaflet is called Scrap. And the whole heading on top says, the scrap the Newham mayor system, restore people's power. On Thursday, 6th of May 2021, Newham's electors have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to change how we are governed, to ensure power is shared and not concentrated into the hands of one all-powerful mayor. Together, let's make the change. The referendum is the only way the people of Neom can fight for democracy. It gives you a choice to select the system of local governance best suited to the needs of Neom residents. We have a wonderfully diverse community with over 300 languages spoken and one of the youngest populations in the UK. We have the talent, ability, and energy to make collective decisions in our best interests. Newham has many challenges, and we no longer need a single person deciding what is best for all of us. Collective decision making via the committee model of governance gives back power to all your elected representatives instead of to one who overrules the others. So Newham referendum vote for committee model on the 6th of May 2020, and their comparison, the list of comparisons on the other page has got these executive powers exercised by one person, and the committee model, that is the preferred kind of model that they are advocating for. Collective decisions made by your councillors with your consultation, and increased council tax up to 16%. Councillors will work towards reducing or freezing council tax, and increased parking tax up to £200 a year per vehicle. Scrap recent parking tax increase is the other side. So they are giving this, and there is another another leaflet that says that is what it says. Vote for committee model. Now the problem with that date, this is the leaflet, these leaflets are being distributed this weekend or today, Monday, 2 days before the election actually. Today is the 3rd, so 2 days. They can't do that on the day of the referendum. And in the past years, that is, the Newham Council has had the elected mayor system in place since 2002. So it's 19 years, calendar years, that it has had a mayor system. And there has been no discussion in the community by any campaigners against the mayor system for 19 years. And compared to Newham, Tower Hamlets has had the mayor system since the October election in 2010, 11 calendar years. And there has been no real campaign for the 11 years against the mayor system in Tower Hamlets. And remember, in both Tower Hamlets and in Newham is absolutely one party. There is no other party. All the councillors at least carry the card, Labour Party card. And in Tower Hamlets, it's not only Labour Party. There are 2 Conservatives and probably 2 Lib Dems. 2 or 3 at the most, I think, Lib Dems. And none of them is kind of genuine in terms of opposing the corrupt mayor system. And in the 11 years now, I mean, let's say the 9 calendar years up to 2019, and before the onset of the pandemic, Tower Hamlets Council had 9 years of the corrupt mayor system. And none of the councillors, remember what I'm saying, none of the councillors in place during those 9 years said anything against the mayor system, for democracy, for accountability, against corruption. And that is the issue that we shall be discussing at length in the next edition, including other things that the other papers have. We haven't gone to the other papers. We shall be doing those in the next part.